I work at Tailwind, which is like a software company. We make marketing software that's really easy for small businesses to use. And I do growth there, which is like, I run experiments. It's like half coding, half marketing. It's a good time. We're always hiring, so if you want to know about that, let me know. Or if you want to work on side projects, I'm always trying to team up with people too, so give me a shout. But what I'm really excited to talk to you guys about today is static site generators. And this is like a really interesting space that I've been playing around with for the past few months. And I'm having just a ton of fun with it. So hopefully the number one thing I want you guys to come away with is like the cool things that you can do and be excited for the fun sort of side projects and things that you can work on with modern site center. Uh-oh, is it? Oh no, okay, well. Thanks, technology. Let's give this a shot. 3, 2, 1, and money. Can we see it? Great, cool, that's me. Let's roll. Okay, so part of the reason I get so freaking excited about static site generators is it brings me back to like that first moment I had when I created my first very bad website in Bootstrap and GitHub Pages. But there's like that moment, you know, when you finally like finish that last closing tag, you put it up, you like merge in your GitHub Pages bands, and like boom, this is live. And this is still embarrassing like 5 years later live, and you can see my broken CSS and like the other stuff. But you know what, there's still like a part of this that is kind of magical. And it's kind of where I fell in love with programming, where I was like, oh, I can actually make something. But then a lot of us like grow into kind of these more advanced and complicated things, right? And then you're just like, oh, what'd you do today? Oh, I spent like 6 hours wrestling with YAML. It's like, oh, it's like not quite as magical, you know? Well, maybe it is, maybe you like that. But part of the reason I'm really excited about this is that eventually everyone needs just like a plain old website. And don't get me wrong, there's like other things. React is great, Vue is great, you know, SPAs are great, but sometimes you just need something that works. And you know, if you need just like HTML that does a few things, that tells people about something, you're not a psychopath, like the tweet says. You're just a normal person who wants to do some cool stuff. So at some point, this is my opinion, is that everyone's going to be in one of two positions, or hopefully both. One, you'll need a website that just works. You'll want to share your stuff on a blog. You'll need to get the word out for your next side project. Maybe you need some simple documentation for that next great thing you launch. Or hopefully, if you're giving back in the community, you'll have someone that, like little Matt 5 years ago, who's like, help, I don't know how to bootstrap. I don't know how to get the HTML file out in the world. You can be like, look here, young one. Go over here, use this thing, and you can get it live really easily. And they can have that same magic moment that all of us have had, too. So hopefully, we'll come away with those two things. So what I'm going to talk about today is a specific type of static site generators with this thing called the Jamstack. If you haven't heard of the Jamstack before, no, it is not related to the best sports movie of all time with Michael Jordan, unfortunately. What it's about is like JavaScript, API, and markups. And basically what it is kind of the opposite of all these complicated server-side applications that rely on this server, right? So no WordPress where you have a server-side CMS just to get a blog up, no kind of single-page app, like if you push your Create React app on something, it's not like that. It's not loading things up every time you get a request. And it's not a monolithic server-run app, so it's not like you're taking your Rails app and pushing it onto Heroku. This is something where you build it once and then you push it live, and it's just a stack of files. And that's really what it is. So here's a quick example of like, let's go ahead and build a Jamstack just to kind of see what the different parts are that we're going to work with here. The first one is JavaScript, and it's not going to be just JavaScript, probably. You'll pair it with something else. Like if we like using Jekyll, if that's kind of our static site generator of choice, we can absolutely spin up a Jekyll new, and we can just sprinkle in a little bit of JavaScript to do what we need to do. Maybe we need to fetch stuff from an API. Maybe we need to make some content dynamic. Maybe we need to provide some extra functionality, and we can do that pretty easily. But anything where people are interacting with it, we're going to use JavaScript as our go-to. We're not going to kick it back to some server and crunch some stuff. We're just going to do it right there in the client. The second thing we're going to do is basically anything that you would normally use a database for, we're going to use an API for instead. And this is actually a pretty big change, but it's a really exciting change, and it's really freeing. And I'm going to show some examples of kind of the stuff you can do using this. You can get a lot more bang for your buck than you could even a few years ago by relying on APIs rather than just controllers, models, databases, all that good stuff that is great when you need it, right? But otherwise, it's kind of like taking a semi-truck when you just want to like nip down to get some groceries, right? It's like, whoa, this is like way overkill for what I actually need for the task at hand. And so if you can kind of be lightweight, it's like you just hop in like a nice little cruiser, or what do you call that? I don't know, like a sedan. That's boring. A Tesla Cybertruck, how about that? So all the rage. The last piece is markup, right? Because we're not going to be fetching stuff in real time for every response and request that we're getting. We're going to basically create markup when you build your static site. So this could be like maybe we're grabbing something from Contentful, which is basically, imagine like the editor data place part of WordPress, but without all the WordPress stuff. Just lets you like edit some content and store it somewhere and then access it through an API. What we do is like, okay, we're gonna pull that into Jekyll and we're gonna save a copy of all that stuff in markup, and then that's what we're gonna serve up to people when we actually visit our site. So there's some real pros to this, and the first one that I'm really excited about is it just makes stuff simple. Now I know like if you're comfortable in Rails or Ruby or whatever your framework of choice is, your flavor of the month is, obviously like that's pretty easy too, but it doesn't always stay easy. And again, like the semi-truck thing, sometimes you just don't need all the stuff you're bringing in if you're just setting up a blog, or if you're helping someone set up their first site. They don't need to know all this other stuff. They don't need all this extra stuff. So it's nice to do some of these simple hosting tools. And I'll show you a couple options too, and one that I'm really, really excited about as well. Another thing is that some of these static site generators have some really sweet modern build tools that are just a lot more fun to work in if you're doing this type of work, where you just want a simple site, you want to work fast, and you want it to be fun. And I'll show you some of the new things like serverless functions and like hot reloading and kind of how that works and give you a quick taste for it. The other thing is that everything lives in Git, right? It's not like we have to, if you've ever, I feel like everyone's done some WordPress work at some point, it's just kind of a given. But if you haven't, here's what happens. Is like you'll develop some stuff locally, you'll have some dummy data, and then like you'll try and like take your template and merge it with their data, but you have different data locally, and like you're trying to sync databases and replace strings, and it's just a yucky experience, and it makes you feel gross. So what if we just managed it like we did our code? Our code lives in Git. What if our content lived in Git too? And that's basically what Jamstack development and using a static site generator allows you to do. Everyone has the same source control, and that simplifies a lot of stuff. It's what I use for my blog, and I'll give you a peek behind the curtain there too. Another really exciting benefit of this is that everything is just freaking fast. Like you're not having to wait for a request and response to resolve on whenever someone hits your site. It's just coming right up because everything's cached. It's just a static file. You're just picking it up. It's already built. Now there's some trade-offs to this, and we'll talk about that too, but you get to your first bite stupid fast out of the box, even without having to do a lot of trickery, which is real nice. The other thing that's really exciting is depending on the framework you choose, and there's a lot, I'll kind of give you some places you can start looking. There's some really thriving open source communities. Things like Jekyll, like if you like Ruby, can be good, but there are even some new things like Gatsby where it's just blowing up and there's tons of innovation and cool things happening. Chris is nodding, he knows. And I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like too. But okay, let's get some of the cons out of the way too, right? This is not like the best thing for all people all the time. Obviously, you don't want to use this as like a replacement for your full, CRUD framework. But what you can do is use this for, again, simple stuff. Your blogs, your API-driven stuff. But even so, let's talk about some of the things that are maybe a little bit different or weird or take some adjusting to get to, or a trade-off. One is that, again, like the benefit of doing it this way is when you build it, it's just built. You don't have to redo that every time someone visits your site. But if you're developing it or if you're updating things, you have to rebuild your site every time, your entire thing, right? So you got to run the build. If you have hundreds of thousands of blog posts, like this would probably not be a great way to go, because every time you updated any string in a blog post, you'd have to rebuild every single thing, which is a lot. If you're developing locally too, there's some setups you can use to make this go faster and not be kind of a drag. But if you're just starting out, you might find yourself like running that build command over and over and over again, kind of on repeat. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that there's kind of a new learning curve if you need to do some of those things that maybe you had helpers for, were kind of done for you in Rails or whatever framework you're using. Things like handling authentication for people logging in. If you're a static site, there's no server to handle that or validate that, and so we have to use APIs instead. If you want form submissions, right, you gotta handle that in a different way and have something set up to handle that. If you want dynamic content, you're gonna have to pull that in through an API, right? And so that's not bad, it's just different, and you have to keep it in mind. There's pros and cons, but I'll show you some of the kind of what that looks like in the wild. And then the other thing to keep in mind too, if you are working for a client or someone else, you can be like, hey, look, you can edit your blog post in Markdown and Git. Isn't that amazing? And they'll say, no, I hate everything about that sentence you just said. That's terrible. Give me WordPress back so I can select things and bold things and do other things. Now, there are kind of third-party CMSs and things that you can add to give kind of the experience that, say, a content writer or a non-technical person would want to interact with and update this site that you made without kind of all the stuff that you hate as a developer. So we'll look at what some of those are. I have one of those set up on my site, and so we can play around with it too. So who's actually doing this? Is anyone doing this? Yes, people are developing using the Jamstack. And not just anyone, people who care about performance, people who know what they're doing about, people who are doing exciting work on the web. Airbnb's data science team has a slick site up. The creator of Lodash has the documentation up in a static site using the Jamstack, so you may have visited a Jamstack site and not even known it. And if you know him, he's a total performance nut in a good way. So like that's kind of like a greater vote of confidence than anything I could say, just the fact that he's using it. And then even things like the design tool Figma, where again, it's very interactive, it's doing lots of cool stuff, it's a highly trafficked site, and it's using the Jamstack for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about, those performance gains and the ease of development that you get. And even really popular blogs who were kind of like ride or die by WordPress, some of them are starting to switch to that. One of the ones that you may have seen a couple years ago, and this is kind of one thing that caught me by surprise and got my attention, was when Smashing Magazine, which is this really popular web dev and design publication, switched completely over to a static site. And they were using this whole host of other things before. Actually, they were stitching together 4 different platforms to do the work that their one Jamstack site did after. So they had a job board that was running on Rails. They had the blog running on WordPress, and that's a huge blog. Again, it's like kind of scary to mess with that, you know? And then at one point they switched some kind of store from Shopify to Magento. And so they had 4 different things they were juggling, trying to stitch together an experience. Obviously, that's kind of weird if you're a visitor. You're getting all these different mangled, kind of jumbled experiences. And as a developer, it's even worse because you're trying to just get stuff done and provide a good experience and update things, and you have to go like learn 4 different things that work in 4 different ways. Some of them are easy to update, some of them aren't, and maybe none of them are, depending on how it's set up. And so what if we could do it a little bit differently? So what they switched to was, again, a Jamstack site using a really simple host we'll talk about and look at and play around with called Netlify. And basically all the things that they were doing before on the server side, they just used APIs for. So they replaced, again, their WordPress search with Algolia search, kind of search as a service, which is really freaking good search if you've ever used it. It's fast, it's easy to use, it's fun to develop with. They used GoCommerce, which is Netlify's headless e-commerce thing. So they actually baked in a full online store with all the checkout functionality, the shopping cart, the payment that you would want, but in a static site, which is crazy. A Netlify CMS where you're able to have a visual editor to update your Markdown using kind of toolbars and WYSIWYG editors like non-technical people would enjoy. And to top it all off, they got basically a progressive web app for free because of the way they were setting it up, which is really awesome. So even when you have a junky connection or you come back, it'll know all these smart things about your experience. And everything's under the same site, right? Because there's no backend, they're all using APIs. Now you don't have this kind of fragmented experience on the developer or the user side. You get one experience. And so it's really cool. Hopefully you're excited. So what does this kind of look like? Like if you want to take a stab at creating one of these Jamstack sites, where should you look? And like a quick disclaimer, there's like a lot of these. There's a really cool site called StaticGen, where they just kind of list all the different static site generators you could want. Some of them are more full-featured than others. For example, if you wanted something that has like all the power of like create React app, but is also static generated, something like Next.js is legit. But if you don't need that, you could go with something like Gatsby, which is going to be more of the website side and the blog side. If you like using Go, you can use Hugo. And there's pretty much any language you can think of. If you want to write this thing in Rust, I think there's a Rust static site generator. If you want to do it without any of these and just use Markdown and some bash scripts, like people have done this. And so whatever you like working in, whatever language you want to play with, there's probably a static site generator. I myself use one that's like modeled off Laravel called Jigsaw. Just because I wanted to learn Laravel and play around with it because that's what we use at work. It's what I read my site in. But there's really no wrong way to go here. So you can hop on that site, play around, and find whatever you want. Because a lot of them kind of work the same way under the hood. But I'll kind of show you a couple that I've used and I'm pretty happy with if you're not sure where to pick. One is kind of like, again, this is a Ruby meetup. If you know Ruby and if you've never done a static site generator before, go try Jekyll. It's kind of I call it the trusty old card, because it's not like flashy, it's not like the new thing, but it works great. And if you love Ruby and you like working in Ruby, it works pretty much exactly like you'd expect, which is a good thing. It's easy to add content, you can add custom categories, you can add your blog, you can hook it up to an API, you can do all these great things, and it just works with the stuff you already know. So if you're in doubt, on the fence, just go try Jekyll. It works great. But the other one I'm really excited about, if you kind of want to play with the new stuff, is Gatsby. For a couple of big reasons. You can go play around with this. Just the community support is fantastic. They're developing this thing like crazy. Their tutorial is great. Their docs are great. But one, I talked about kind of the speed benefits. I've yet to see a static site generator that really kind of does the speed and performance aspect out of the box as well as Gatsby. Right out of the box, it's giving you things like prefetching, it's splitting your code, it's kind of setting you up for success as a progressive web app, like out of the box without even doing anything, which is super cool, and you can take it even further pretty easily. Another thing that's kind of interesting and fun is everything is really modeled off GraphQL. So you're not going to use kind of like your REST APIs like you were before. You're going to kind of plug them into Gatsby's kind of built-in data layer and use GraphQL to query only the data you need, only on the pages you need it, which is a little wonky, but also super cool and really useful. If you've never tried GraphQL before, this is one of the best ways, I think, to actually create something useful and get your hands dirty with GraphQL. So we've kind of talked about some of the data sources we can use, right? We know that we have some CMSs, some Markdown, some data we're passing in. We're going to have our build tool like Jekyll or like Gatsby. But then what about that deploy step, right? Because it's cool when you're developing locally, but ultimately the goal is to get this out in the world without pulling your hair out. And so you can see there's quite a few options that you have. GitHub Pages works with pretty much all of these. Netlify, Surge, just all these great ones. But I'd say there's a couple to really look at. If you're just getting started out. One is like, Jekyll works great with GitHub Pages. You pretty much already have this if you use GitHub. If you're not using GitHub, what are you doing? Go start using GitHub, please, for the love of everything good. But again, GitLab Pages has a similar thing, whatever you want to do. But this is like an easy way for a simple site, and it works fine, especially if you're not getting any, really leaning heavily on APIs or any of the other crazy stuff that we're going to look at with the next option. It's a good, simple option, and it's fine. And it has good docs, and you can get through it pretty well. But the one that I'm really excited about, as you can tell from all of the stickers all over my laptop, is Netlify. And Netlify is like, there's all this hype around it, but it's well-deserved because their developer experience is pretty unmatched from most SaaS companies I use. I actually love using their stuff. It's like a really great continuous deployment experience. Their CLI is great. They're always adding good stuff. They're always adding new things, like the serverless function thing that I'm going to show you guys here in a minute is pretty new, and it works awesome. And it's kind of like, it brings back that magic feeling I was talking about in the minute of like, oh, wow, this works, and it was that easy. Like, cool, but with serverless, this new stuff that you may or may not have played with, this is a great way to get started. And it's a generous free plan, and they charge fairly if you need to use it a little bit more heavily. So highly, highly recommend this, and we'll launch some site with Netlify here in a minute. If you don't believe me, believe the creator of Vue. That's what he uses to host Vue stuff. So it's not just some guy in his garage. This stuff works pretty stinking well. And again, like I was talking about the serverless functions, this is the other thing I'm excited to kind of show off for you guys. We'll just pile on all our demos at the end. So either it ends in like a grand finale or like a burning cacophony of our Wi-Fi not working. But the serverless functions are super cool. Here's a couple I have running on my site right now that we'll play with. Obviously dad joke, because that's very important. And then the obligatory hello world. But this was really, really easy to set up. It looks like my screenshots are kind of borked here, but you can tell it's really just setting up like a functions folder, my static site, a folder for the function, and then I just stuff my JavaScript that I want to run in that folder. And Netlify, if I give it a couple lines in the config, is smart enough to know, hey, this is a serverless function. When you deploy your static site, I'm going to deploy this serverless function along with it. And it's just going to work and be attached to your static site and do what you want to do, which is really cool, and I'm going to show you how it works, and maybe we can make one. So what can you kind of do with a serverless function plus a static site? Because static site, that's not super new. APIs aren't even new. But kind of rolling your own with serverless, that's kind of cool, and maybe we haven't done that as much. So a few that are, and I also say helpers. Netlify has some things built in that are not technically serverless. Like you can just throw a property on a form, and it'll use its backend to kind of take care of all the handling for it. But the other two are our serverless functions. So one is you can kind of use its identify serverless function to add authentication to any admin dashboard. So if I have like a /admin page on my site where I want to go send someone on my team to update the CMS, I have mine set up where it can check and see, hey, log in with your GitHub profile, and Netlify takes care of the auth in the background, and then it'll just return you to the page that you want, and then you're just editing stuff in JavaScript, which is pretty great. The other thing you can do is you can use like a headless CMS to update your site's content and draw that data in from your API. So that's fun. So cool, let's launch some stuff and see how it works. And this will be interesting. All right. Okay, so let's see. I have a few things I want to demo. Okay, first one is, cool, Gatsby Develop. And so I have a couple of static sites here that we're working with. Is this big enough? Can you guys see this? Somewhat? Sweet. Okay, cool. So I downloaded and ran npm install on a couple sites here. So this is just a Gatsby site, and I just downloaded it from one of the starters, and so it doesn't have anything too crazy. But I'm just going to go ahead and run Gatsby Develop to spin this up in my local dev environment, and let's see how it works, just to get a feel for kind of the development experience. You can see it's going to start building out all this stuff because, again, it's a static site. It's going to build all this stuff up once, and then that's what we're going to be working with. And you can see the Gatsby CLI is really good. It gives you some really good local development options out of the box. So it's already kind of spun up a local server for me. And then it's got this GraphQL, which we'll play with here in a second, which is kind of this in-browser IDE to just play around with GraphQL queries using the real data you have on your site right now. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. Let's see if it works. Cool, it does. So you can see like we've got some really cool animations because this is really just using React. Under the hood. And so let's go ahead and see if we can. I should have opened this up in my editor beforehand, but that's fine. We'll just do it now. So let's see if we can go ahead and update this text really quick. Cool. I'm Jane Doe. Let's go ahead and say, what up, Ruby? And save it. And with any luck, cool, we got some hot reloading, and so this is pretty easy to work in. It's a great developer experience. Last meeting, best meeting. Oh no. Cool. And it's pretty easy. If you're developing this stuff, it's a great developer experience because it's going to hot reload stuff. It's crazy fast, and it's just going to kind of work in the background. And the other thing that we can do as well is play around in this graphical editor. So what this is, make this a little bigger. Basically, again, depending on what we have configured, right? We have some Markdown files. Maybe we're pulling some stuff in from APIs out there. But Gatsby is only going to kind of let us dynamically change the content that we pull in with these queries. And so GraphQL can be kind of different to work with. You can see here we kind of are nesting things and kind of rolling our own thing. We don't have these preset endpoints like we do in REST. But what's nice here is it's kind of like self-documenting. It'll kind of show you what you can play with. Like front matter won't show up unless you can actually work with front matter. If I go ahead and hit this query, you can see the exact data is going to return from that query. So we're pulling in like these MDX things, the word count, the paragraphs, words, sentences, all that stuff. And you can see exactly what's going to show up there. And then I can just consume that using the same way I'd consume any API in React on the other end. If I move this and run it again, it's going to update really quickly. And if I want to go down here and hit Control Spacebar, it's going to give me autocomplete for the options that I have available here, which is really handy if you kind of don't know what you even have. Do I have an ID? Yes, I do. ID, and you can get that right away. So a really nice editor to play with. If you're new to GraphQL and new to Gatsby, highly recommend checking it out, and it's pretty easy to get working. But this is great for local development, but if we want this to be even easier, we should just go ahead and set it live. So there's a couple ways that we can do it. And we're going to try it both ways. One, I'll go ahead and start this one up because it takes a little bit longer to build, and then we'll switch over to Jekyll, try deploying that too. And hopefully they both work. But let's go ahead and do this one through our Git branch, because kind of the two main ways are, one, we can do it through the Gatsby CLI, but that's fine. It works well. We can do Gatsby deploy and point it to our built directory with our static assets, and it'll just shoot it on up. But what I do with my site, and what you'd probably want to do, is just connect it to your Git repo, so that every time you push to master, it just go ahead and, like a CI pipeline, it's going to go ahead and just deploy your latest update on your branch. So let's go ahead and do that. So it looks like we're good on, we don't have Git set up, which is fine. So we need to set that up. So we'll do a git init. We'll do a git add init. Sweet. Looks like we're good. We should do a Gatsby build, though, to make sure that we have all our assets built. Oh, no, we're not, because with this one, it shouldn't matter, because we're going to send it on up to GitHub anyways, and it'll take care of the rest. So let's go ahead and just create a new branch. Let's call it Gatsby test. I think that's how we can do it. Uh-oh. No, what was this? Hub create. If you've never used GitHub's command line tool for doing this, it's actually pretty nifty, if you can remember the commands. Let's see if it'll make me one. Cool, we created a remote. Git push, origin, master, and we'll go ahead and push that bad boy on up. Cool, and then what we can do is do hub browse, bring that up. And because this is a Gatsby kind of starter, it's pretty smart, and it's going to know, hey, we have this deployed a Netlify feature on here. So what we can actually do is just go on here and say, hey, yeah, we want to connect to GitHub. Cool, there's where I'm at. Gatsby test, save and deploy. And with any luck. Cool, so you can see that site deploy is in progress. If we were to go check on it here, you can see it's building that, because again, it's got to build the static thing. So while that's kind of running, we're just going to let it go. And let's go ahead and go on over to our other project, and let's build a Jekyll site. Cool, so we got our Jekyll. Let's go ahead and make a new one and see if we can do it from scratch. So we'll call this new Jekyll. It's like new Coke, but with Jekyll. Cool, and we'll do Jekyll new. Oh, yeah, here. With any luck, it'll give us a new one. Cool, so now we have Jekyll. So if we do a Jekyll serve, it should spin up on our local development server. And you can see we have a Jekyll starter. So if we wanted, we can go in here and update any of our Markdown files. Here, let's go do that really quick. We could say, do we have like a post here or something? There we go. Welcome to Markdown. Heyo, all the stuff. Okay. Instead of title, we'll say, welcome to Rubytown. And then we should just be able to, again, if you've never worked with sort of static site before, this is basically front matter. So we can just put some little YAML stuff at the top of our Markdown file, and it's smart enough to know, hey, this title property, make this the title when you spit it out in the template. And then all the rest of your content kind of works just like you'd think. We have some liquid here, again, just using some Ruby stuff, but it's pretty much what you'd expect. So again, we'll do Jekyll build, and then if we do Jekyll serve, and we go back here, you can see we have Rubytown. Awesome. So now that we have this working, how do we actually get this up and live so that the world can see it? And what if we don't want to use GitHub, right? We know that we can do that. Well, we assume so. We'll go check it again. It's like Schrodinger's Gatsby site right now. We don't know if it's live or not, but we'll check. I think it's OK. But for now, let's go ahead and build this again. And let's go ahead and use the Netlify CLI. So I have Netlify CLI installed. And you can see we have all these great options once you've logged in to kind of manage your Netlify site. Maybe make that a little bigger. But one of the options we have here is Netlify deploy. So if we check out our settings here, you can see it's going to ask me what I want to do. Hey, do you want to link this to an existing site or create a new one? I want to create a new site. This is Matt Woods' team. I could name this whatever I want, but I'm just going to let it name it something random. And it's going to go ahead and start creating my site. Now, it's going to ask, hey, where's the site that you built? You ran Jekyll build. Where did it build it? I think it put it in the, _site. And so hopefully I'm right. Cool. And so now what it's going to do, it hasn't actually launched it yet. It's going to be a live draft URL, which is kind of neat. So I haven't launched this, but if we go here, you can see, OK, cool. It looks like it's working. So let's go ahead and see if we can push it all the way and just pass it the prod flag. And it's going to do a similar thing. It's going to grab that directory. It's going to build all my stuff. With any luck, it should push it live. If it likes me. Oh, published. Oh, no, I published the wrong one. Hold on, let's try that again. Directory I want to publish is sites. No, I didn't. Did I put the wrong one? Site? Live debugging. You gotta love it. Thank you. Goofy Franklin, and there we go. Jekyll site is live, and it only took 5 seconds longer than it should have because I can't type, which is perfect. So that's good. Let's check out the other one we did through our GitHub deploy. So it looks like it's live. You can see our master branch is public. If we go to Hungry Alien, you can see that it's live. Oh, it looks like I didn't commit my changes, classic. But if I had, it would have said, hi, Ruby, and you would have all been amazed. But just be amazed that it's live and that it works pretty much the way you'd expect. And you could update this very, very easily if you wanted to, either in your code editor of choice or going in GitHub or hooking it up to something else like a CMS. And then whenever you publish to the master branch, it would go ahead and rebuild when it saw that event happen. Pretty neat. Cool. So let's see what else we want to demo here. So we've shown you Gatsby Develop with GraphQL. We've deployed our Gatsby site with GitHub, and it worked. We even deployed a Jekyll site with the Netlify CLI. No Git required, and that worked fine. My dad joke. Cool. Let me show you my dad joke. Let's see here. So if we just go to mattwoods.io/jokes, this is just a little serverless function that I put on my site here. So you can go to this. It's in the world. And this is just to play around with dad joke here. You can see you can get all the dad jokes you want, which is great. But all this is doing behind the scene, this is pretty much like the simplest serverless function you can build. But it's just pulling from kind of my little serverless API here, this dad joke. And so you can see it's just pulling from here. It's coming from my own site. And so yeah, I haven't screened all these. I don't know how safe for Twitch they are. No. So what's great about this is it's actually pulling from a live API. Yeah. Wait, say what? Oh, yeah. So someone asked, hey, are these jokes all built, basically? And is that how it's pulling from the API? And the great thing is no, it's actually using an actual AWS Lambda function to take care of this in the background. And then we're just consuming it with JavaScript, just using Axios. I can actually show you how it's working here. I think this is my branch here. Yeah, cool. So if we play around with this, you can see, here's the actual code that's happening behind the scene, right? So all we're doing is we're fetching that dad joke, and we're, actually that isn't the dad joke I'm using. That's the serverless part. But all we're doing here is just consuming it from our API, and then we're just passing it here into our view template, and then we're just pulling that in here. And that's how you're getting your dad joke. But if we want to go ahead and play with this locally, how would we go ahead and create a new serverless function or kind of work with this serverless function? What's kind of going on underneath the hood? And so I'll go ahead and show you here. Let me bump this up. I have a really simple function here that I'll just load this up locally. And so we're going to use this netlify dev command. And then we're going to pass it our built site so we can play with this here. But if we do this here, you can see it's a local version of the site, and it's just working the same way. But it's actually not using the live serverless function. It's using a locally developed version that's running on our computer. So you don't have to worry about cores and all that other nasty stuff when you're developing things. You can see here it had a request from that endpoint. If we reload, it's going to get another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. But what if we actually want to go ahead and play around with this? What we can do is play around with the Netlify CLI just a little bit more. So if we do Netlify functions, you'll see some of the options that we have to play around with this. You can see we can create a function, we can build a function, or we can invoke a function. So let's go ahead and invoke this function manually. And again, this isn't pulling from the live version now. This is just all running right on our laptop. We wouldn't even need well, we would need an internet connection because it's still going to pull that actual API, but the local part would work just fine. So if we do invoke joke, you can see it's going to ask us, hey, do we want to use our authentication, which it also has, I think, for sure, why not? And then it's going to give us the same thing right there. So just like we did live, it's going to give us that message, which is cool. If we want to create a new function, it's also pretty easy. So if we want to create one, it'll actually give us some different starters and options for different things we want to do, and kind of help you scaffold out that serverless function really quickly, which we won't do the whole thing here, but maybe we want to do a GraphQL gateway or Apollo GraphQL. Maybe that's what we want to do. You can name it, and it's going to create it up here. Cool. So now if we go back to our editor, you can see that we have this new folder, and it's kind of put in all of the stuff we need to start working on this serverless function. We can keep developing it here, we can change stuff, we can get it working, and then when we're ready, we deploy it along with the rest of our site, and it just works. And we can use it just like we were doing the other one out in the wild, which is pretty neat. And you can sprinkle that on your static site. You can use it for other things. You can even have no static site and just play with the functions if you wanted. It's a pretty easy way if you don't want to wrestle with AWS Lambda to kind of get in kind of a softball and just play around with it. Cool. 2 more things, and then I'll take any questions you have, and we can play around with it. But I mentioned another benefit of this is kind of you can do some things like authentication. So I'll show you kind of how I manage my static sites CMS. And it's really just using GitHub Auth. I just piggyback off of it, and I use Notifies Identify function. So what it's going to do, you'll see it here for a second. It'll show the Netlify screen, and because I'm already logged into GitHub, it should go ahead and authenticate me and pass me on to the admin view once I go to my admin view. So you can see here it is, Identify. It's checking my GitHub, and boom, I'm in here. And now I'm in this kind of visual WYSIWYG editor where I can edit any blog post I want. So if I want to go to local backup was recovered, no. You can see here, I can edit things in a WYSIWYG editor, but under the hood, it's just changing the Markdown, committing it to Git, and then pushing it to my master branch. So if I want to go ahead and add a category here, say this is a video post, I want to do video, I want to do publish. Let's do publish now. Again, it's just updated the front matter in that Markdown file, and now it's committing it and pushing it to my master branch. And so if we go and check our Netlify dashboard for my site, you'll see here it automatically created the commit, and it's automatically building and deploying that. And here, once it finishes building, it'll be live on my site with that new category. And it's pretty easy. We didn't have to do that much. And even someone who wasn't a developer, if you set them up with a GitHub account, or you can use Google, you can use whatever auth provider you want that works with the serverless function Netlify has given you. You can set them up with that. They have the WYSIWYG editor they like, where they can kind of play around with it like they would in Microsoft Word, but you get the development and continuous integration pipeline that you wanted. And so everyone wins, hopefully. So it's a pretty fun thing to do. Cool. Oh, I'll show you one more little fun thing that I liked. I have a few stickers, but really the reason I wanted the stickers is so I could use the serverless function to use this Meetup thing. I didn't make this, someone else made it, but I thought it was really stinking cool. So again, this is a Netlify site that's just using a serverless function to go through and find your latest Meetup event based on your URL. And then it'll find all of you who have RSVP'd, and then it'll randomly draw one of you, and then I'll give you stickers where you can give it to someone else. Or, I don't know, give a speech, whatever. So, okay, let's see if it works. And hey, Austin, you want some stickers? Thanks for running the computer, man. Cool. So I'll give those to you after. But you can see if we wanted to reset that, and maybe wanted to pick 3 people, you can do it. And again, it's going to pull from that. I'm a winner too. And it's pretty slick. And again, there's no back end here. This is pretty cool to set up. It's just all using serverless stuff. So kind of in closing, I think static site generators are amazing. I think it's one of the most magical and fun things that I work on for a little side project, especially when you pair it with these kind of newer things that can breathe fresh life into it, like serverless. And so if you have questions about it, let me know. Let's jam. And otherwise, I'd love to kind of see what you build with this and what you think. But thanks for letting me share it with you. Hope it was fun. Sweet.
Test. So the serverless stuff, is that actually using AWS Lambda and they're hiding that, or did Netlify make their own like serverless stuff?
Yeah, so they're really using AWS Lambda. They just made a nice wrapper around it, so you don't have to do as much setup, basically, and wrestle with the config as much. And it's free, so that's nice, because you're letting kind of Netlify foot the bill if you just want to play around with it. But yeah.
Yeah, do you know when that stops being free? Because I'm consistently amazed at how much free stuff you get from Netlify.
You get a lot.
I'm still not paying anything.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm at level 0, the free plan. If you bring it up here, you can see I can do up to 125K requests and have up to 100 hours of runtime before they make me start paying, which is pretty generous, as is most of their stuff. And so unless my dad joke API really blows up, I'm probably in the clear. We probably have to make a much cooler API to blow through that. But yeah, you get a pretty generous plan out of the box.
So what happens when you do blow up that API call?
Like if you went over?
Yeah.
I think you'd have to pay for it.
I mean, what happens to the site, I guess, is the question.
To the site?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's probably, you could check Netlify stuff and they'd probably tell you. I mean, great problem to have. I assume they wouldn't cut you off immediately, but I don't know. They'd probably just make you pay. And if you're going through that, you can probably, pay whatever. Most of your stuff isn't crazy expensive. You can probably pay for it. But yeah, when you blow through it, let me know with your dad joke API v2. Cool. Any others? Sweet. Cool. Well, if you think of anything else, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up IRL. And let's jam. Cool. Thanks, crew.